Gurmina Margaret, Alas Cancordia, and I too want to welcome the family of Shane O'Farrell to the Dáil Gallery here today and to commend them for the massive campaign that they have run over the last number of years in the face of such resistance by the political establishment in this country. To lose a son is a disaster for any parent. It's an excruciating pain for a parent to have to bury a child. It's unimaginable. And indeed, most of us here won't even try to imagine what it would be like for us to do exactly the same thing. Because even that act of trying to imagine it is such a difficult thing for people to have to do. But that should have been the limit to the pain that that family suffered. But it was not. Pain and suffering has been heaped on that family over and over and over again by the tortuous journey that they have been forced to take in relation to achieve justice for their son. At 3 o'clock today, Shane O'Farrell's family gave a presentation in the AV room as to what happened to their son. And at 4 o'clock, actually, I brought a family of Noah Donoghue to make a presentation to what happened to their son. 2 children whose lives were lost in preventable situations. Their families forced to come to Leinster House to plead with TDs for justice for their children. Is that how a functioning democracy and a justice system should work? That we should have a trail of families coming to Leinster House to plead with us for justice for their children. And that our instinct as TDs, or our instinct as parents, should not be hardwired into ensuring that they have justice, rather than the instinct of some people here to push back against every opportunity for justice to be achieved for their families. I think it's important to state for both families that their sons can't be brought back, and they know that. But the fact that these relentless campaigns are happening is not just for the justice for their sons, but it's to make sure that this does not ever happen again to anybody else. Because this is equally as important a result for the justice campaigns these families are involved in. And mark my words, if there is no justice for these families to what happened to their sons, this will happen again. Because if we live in an accountability-free zone, we will be cursed to wake up another morning to turn on the radio of another situation that happens. Because unless there is a cost for individuals for the actions that they take in relation to this, those actions will be repeated at some stage in the future by them or others. And that's one of the big problems that exists in the administration of our country. It's an accountability-free zone where nobody has to pay the price for the wrongs that they do in relation to these situations. And that is allowed to happen by this administration. So I think it's a great credit to the O'Farrell family that their campaign for justice is not just justice for their son, but also reform of the system to make sure that this never happened again. Shane was killed either because of a litany of dysfunction by the state, or worse, because his killer was protected by the state. And I think that the publication of the final report of the scoping exercise was the latest instalment of state-sponsored pain to that family. The fact that Shane was, in that report, part to blame for his own death is a horrendous indictment against that report, against its authors, and I believe, as a result, that report should be withdrawn as a result of that. You know, the forensic collusion investigator talked about the cyclist was wearing dark clothes, etc. Failure to have such a lighting is highly negligent behaviour on part of the cyclist. And I would just ask people to think about that sentence and think about the damage that that sentence does, both to the deceased and to the family that's left behind. Because juxtaposition, the action by Shane that night and the action by Gredziuka in relation to what he has done, juxtaposition the action of Shane and the actions of the state in relation to what they have done. And culpability is not confusing in that scenario whatsoever. Culpability is obviously on Gredziuka, and it's also on the state in relation to what they've done. And any effort to redirect culpability to deceased is a shocking indictment of this government and this state as well. There should be no equivocation of where blame lies for the death of Shane. It is a gross insult to the family, and that report must be withdrawn. And it also wasn't part of the terms of reference of that report to make a finding of the circumstances of Shane's death. Indeed, the family today have shown that the terms of references were specifically amended by the Department of Justice and the Office of the Attorney-General to exclude the trial of Zygimantas Grzegorz in this situation. Now, the Minister has stated in your particular speech tonight that the scoping exercise was thoroughly investigated. Now, I think that's a deeply worrying statement, Minister, for you to make. This particular report did not request underlying GSOC's statutory report, which formed part of the terms of reference. And as a result, given the mistakes that were made in this particular report, I see little hope in your speech of justice being achieved from this government in relation to Shane's situation. And then the fact that the Minister went on to say that she was not going to oppose this motion. Minister, that is an empty formula. Because what you're doing there is you're saying that you're not going to action on the motion, but you're not going to oppose the motion. You cannot be in two separate places at one time. Agreeing with the motion or not opposing the motion, and yet not willing to fulfil the motion, are bipolar positions. And in fairness, Minister, it's a cheap trick as well, which is not acceptable given the gravity of the situation that we're talking about by the government. I think one of the most cynical things that I see in politics in this House over the last 14 years